Welcome to Real Turkey channel. This broadcast is presented by Atilla Shilada, who shall soon reveal his face. Today's topic is Erdogan's lethal economic legacy for Turkey. To recall, President Erdogan has been running Turkey since 2002, and what he's leaving behind to the younger generations is 100% inflation, $50 billion of current account deficit, and $181 billion of foreign debt coming due within the next 12 months. To put that in perspective, Turkey's 2022 GDP is going to be somewhere around $725 billion. So this is roughly 22% of GDP will have to be repaid as foreign debt in the next 12 months. Before, let me just lower this because my producer gets extremely angry if there is too much headroom. Before I get to the meaning of these devastating statistics, I want to make sure everyone understands that this is not Turk's fault. This is not Turkey's fault. This is not the result of any kind of external shocks that hit Turkey, or war, or famine, or some kind of natural disaster like the 1997 or 1998 Great Marmara earthquake. This is the doing of a single man, Mr. Erdogan, who insists on insane policies to starve Turkey. First, I want to prove that with a couple of quotes and newspaper articles. Two, I want to explain what these three figures mean. And finally, I want to end this video in a hopeful message, which is that he shall not be around come July 2023. What inspired me this video is Erdogan's speech on Friday, May 28th, I believe, May 29th. See, I'm suffering from massive allergy attacks and I'm taking heavy medication. I don't know if I'm shooting a video right now or dreaming about shooting a video. He made a speech somewhere in Turkey and he reiterated the results behind his policy that led to 100% inflation. This is from Bloomberg. You can see the date. You can easily go to Bloomberg and check it. Erdogan says only traitors or illiterates link rate to inflation. If you read the article, you will see Erdogan continues to claim, despite unsurmountable evidence, that higher interest rates will lead to higher inflation. Not only is he completely illiterate about economics, but he's also arrogant enough to blame every economist who tries to tell him the truth as either a traitor or an illiterate. Because of this policy of lowering interest rates to fight inflation, which is like drinking another shot of whiskey to end your alcoholism, Turkey is now doomed to have 100% inflation. He made another statement on Saturday, which shows that not only doesn't he understand economics, he is also blind and deaf to the plight of the Turkish people who have fallen into poverty or even starving. The chart below is from a 2021 Gallup poll conducted in over 30 countries, I believe, and published, at least, mentioned in a May of 12 article. You can find it here. And let's read it. Remember, this guy says no one is starving in Turkey. And the chart is about Turkish adults' ability to afford necessities for life. The question is, have there been times in the past 12 months when you lacked money for food? 59%. 59% of participants in this poll said, sometime or many times I did not have enough food to feed myself. The second part of the question is, have there been times in the past 12 months when you lacked money for shelter? 46% said so. Can you imagine that? I mean, Erdogan claims he reigns over the richest, most advanced democracy and economy of the world, and more than half of people either don't have enough money for food or roughly 40%, 45% can't afford rent. They'll be evicted eventually and become homeless. Here's another one about poverty. This is from Bayanet.com, and you can find it on the internet. It's a March survey by Istanbul Economic Research led by Can Selçuklu, a good friend of mine and a very decent and reliable pollster. It confirms Gallup findings by stating that 59% of Turkish citizens can't make ends meet. This is how bad it is in Turkey. Now let's get back to these figures and allow me to explain how Erdogan is the single cause behind them. First of all, as of April, Turkey's CPI inflation is only 70%. But I forecast that by the end of the year, Turkey will have 100% inflation. I appeal to all the Americans, the citizens of UK, and good people of Europe to make sense of this figure. In the United States, inflation is something like 7%. In EU and UK, maybe a percentage lower or not. And I mean, with 7% inflation, Americans are already blaming Biden, and his party will probably lose midterm elections. In Europe, despite soaring energy and food prices, European Central Bank will be forced to raise interest rates. In Turkey, none of this is happening. This is why inflation has taken a life of its own, which means inflation is no longer driven by higher costs, by higher wage demands, by robust domestic demand, or even by the devaluation of the Turkish currency. It is driven by expectations, self reinforcing um, expectations, in the sense that everyone knows Erdogan is completely wrong about the causes and treatments for inflation. Therefore, he is going to press on with this policy of keeping interest rates at a negative level. And because of that, Turkish inflation will rise. Therefore, at each bargaining round, labor asks for higher wages. Any company that has marketing power, that has pricing power, raises its prices by adding a couple of percentage points on the past inflation. People who have special skills, doctors, attorneys, engineers, artists, continue to ask higher fees for their services simply because they know whatever they charge today is going to be eroded by rising inflation. And this is what we call an inflationary spiral or self fulfilling prophecy. I found the word. It is actually people not believing in inflation to be going down soon, and therefore try to stop the erosion in their living standards by charging higher prices or asking for higher wages. And add on top of that that Turkey imports all of its energy from abroad. It has significant food shortage, which will lead to at least 12 million tons of wheat to be imported. We're also deficient in uh, oil seeds. Uh, as a result, coupled with the weak currency of the Turkey and rising global commodity prices, cost push inflation will also rise. So 100% inflation by year end is not an exaggerated scenario. $50 billion current account deficit. Clearly, if you have 14% interest rate in a country where inflation is expected to reach 100%, people scramble to purchase as many goods and services as they possibly can because they know it's going to be, the prices are going to be higher the next day. But as I've said, in Turkey, everything you produce or consume has an important component. It requires important energy, in most cases, important agricultural commodities or important high technology um, uh, raw materials such as chips, etc. In other words, the fear of inflation leading to higher domestic consumption or leading to domestic consumption being forward drives the current account deficit. On top of that, of course, we have tremendous needs for energy imports. In the first 4 months of the year, Turkey paid roughly $32 billion for natural gas and oil. So multiply that by three. Unless Brent prices go down miraculously, Turkey will pay roughly $120 billion to cover its energy needs. Despite the good tourism season, in the next 12 months, Turkey will have roughly $50 billion of current account deficit. That is over 6% of the national income, that's GDP. And usually, when current account deficits exceed 5% of a country's GDP, alarm bells ring. That's not an economic theory, but an observation that current account deficits in excess of 5% are always the harbinger of some kind of financial crisis. And of course, if you see my previous video, Turkey on the verge of capital controls, Turkish lira has crashed through the floor again. It has lost something like 20% against the dollar since the beginning of the year, one of the worst performers, and roughly 80% against the dollar over the last 12 months. More importantly, Turkey is looking at a $50 billion current account deficit, and these will be paid through central bank's FX reserves, but central bank has only usable FX reserves of $30 billion. There, I don't need to provide further proof. And more importantly, Turkey could also face a foreign debt crunch or balance of payments crisis because Turkish banks and Turkish sovereign, and Turkish non-financial companies will have to pay off or borrow once again $100 billion of $181 billion of foreign debt. Now, usually, this sum, although huge, doesn't constitute a major problem for Turkey because Turkey used to have credibility, credit rating. Only 7 years ago, Turkey had a investment grade credit rating, and we could borrow as much as we want to at reasonable rates. Right now, we're at the level of junk. I think like 7 levels before investable. The CDS, which prices or measures Turkey's default risk, is something like 750 basis points. Anything over anything over 500 basis points means that the country has a very high default risk. Anything over 900 basis points means even though there has been no official declaration of bankruptcy or insolvency, the country is bankrupt. So, how will this $180 billion of foreign debt will be rolled over or paid off? Well, some of it is trade credit, some of it is collateralized by the foreign currency deposits of Turkish banks and corporates abroad, and some of it is simply borrowing by Turkish multinationals with international parents. Therefore, a simple rule of thumb is that at a much higher cost, Turkey will be able to roll over 80% of maturing debt. So within a year, 80% of $181 billion is, I'm sorry, put it this way, 20% will have to be paid from Turkey's own coffers. That's from the central bank's reserves. And 20% times 180 billion is roughly 36 billion. In other words, within the next 12 months, Turkey will have to pay off $36 billion to foreign creditors. In other words, $36 billion of hard currency will leave the Turkish financial system and go home to the lenders. That, of course, means that Turkey will have even a much weaker currency. I've told you, currency crash is coming, and it has come, by the way. Since I shot that video, Turkish lira depreciated something like 10% against the dollar. What is the end result? If you look at this picture, you have economic misery unprecedented in Turkish history. We have never seen anything like that, perhaps since the mid 1990s, in particular in 1994, right before Mexico's tequila crisis, where we had triple digit inflation and huge current account deficits, but not that much foreign debt. And the person who presided over this debacle, Ms. Tansu Çiller, is no longer in Turkish politics. She was eliminated from politics in 2001, in 2002 general elections. Now, clearly, you have 100% inflation, which is, from a psychological viewpoint, devastating to the morale of the consumers. Nobody uh, will have any extra money left in her budget to buy luxuries like new clothes for the children, perhaps go out once to dinner with the family, or go take in a concert or at a movie. People are forced to only afford their very basic needs. And of course, that's the definition of a low income class country. Moreover, if you read IMF blogs, they will tell you that such massive poverty is usually the precursor of social unrest. In other words, people riot because they can't even afford basic necessities to sustain their lives. And I'm afraid after the summer season, when prices traditionally slow down because we have a bountiful of vegetable and fruit harvest and there is no heating bills. But in the winter, it's going to be completely different, and I would not be surprised if we have food riots, thanks to Mr. Erdogan. And of course, when it comes to foreign debt, an 80% rollover ratio, that means paying back $20 out of every $100 you have borrowed, means banks have fewer assets or liabilities to make loans to the people, i.e., loan rates will go up. In particular, uh, demand for houses and consumer durables will decline. And finally, of course, loan rates will go up, which means when you want to renew your loan, you'll have to pay a higher interest expense out of your budget. Or it's going to be worse than that. Perhaps Fed will raise interest rates too much. Perhaps a crisis caused by Ukraine war or Chinese rapidly slowing economy would lead all the money and credit to flow out of emerging markets, of which Turkey is one, and Turkey will not be able to borrow. In that case, we will have to declare a debt moratorium or debt default, at which time, of course, we will have a balance of payments crisis and excruciating recession. This is the legacy of Erdogan, who has governed Turkey for 20 years and who still claims there is nothing wrong with his management or Turkish economic performance. As I've said, I want to leave this video with hopeful comments. Turkey is going to hold elections, both presidential and parliamentary, latest by June 2023, perhaps earlier than that, but that's the subject of a different video. And at that time, Erdogan and his two-party alliance, AKP and MHP, would be completely wiped off from the face of Turkish politics. And that indeed is going to be the subject of my next video. Why do I think that way? Let me show you some polls. This is the average of all publicly available polls published between April 22nd and May 22nd. If you look at the averages, the AKP and MHP coalition, the governing coalition, gets only 38.5% of the vote. The rest belongs to the opposition. So 38% versus 52%, right? Yeah, 52%. Okay. And there is no way Erdogan and his AKP MHP can close that gap. Let me show you another article. It's not only AKP MHP which are dropping in the polls like a, Led Zeppelin, pun intended, but it's also Erdogan who's going to lose presidential elections by a landslide. This is, again, from a Bayanet article. This is a poll conducted between May 12th and 15th across Turkey by Yöneylem Research Institute, center-left but fairly impartial, and they asked the best question in terms of judging the presidential race, which is if there was a presidential election next Sunday, would you vote for President Erdogan or the opposition candidate? The cleverness of this question is put it doesn't pit Erdogan against the presumptive candidates, but it asks a you know, uh, general question of would you vote for Erdogan under any circumstances? And only 34% would vote for Erdogan, whereas 51.8% will not. Even if you add the 7.4% who said they would not vote, and the 6.8% who said they were undecided, Erdogan still loses. So, if you have an interest in Turkey or in the welfare of people who live in Turkey, no worries. This nightmare will be over in a year. Thanks for watching another video of Real Turkey channel. We always enjoy your comments and try to respond to them. Please write to us below. Tell us what you want to hear about Turkey. For instance, real estate was a frequent question, and we did a video on that. If you have a question, or if several commentators have the same question, I'll gladly answer that. Otherwise, watch for our next video, which is about the upcoming Turkish elections and why Erdogan will never win another election again. Wish you a happy weekend. This is Atilla Eşada saying goodbye on behalf of Real Turkey channel.